Breaking news coming out of America. This emerged a few hours ago. A judge in the U.S. has dismissed a criminal case against Donald Trump, which accused him of holding on to classified documents. The Florida judge, who was nominated by Mr. Trump while he was president, said the leader of the prosecution was unlawfully appointed and lacked the authority to bring the case. Correspondents say it's another big win for Mr. Trump as he seeks re-election to the White House. We'll try and get more on that as we get it, and hopefully get some analysis on it as well. But to the other big story tonight, Donald Trump and Joe Biden have both said America needs to come together in the aftermath of the assassination attempt on the former president. Mr. Trump is in Milwaukee ahead of the Republican National Convention. He told a newspaper he had completely rewritten his speech to call for national unity. Both men are returning to campaigning this week, and correspondents say they'll be hugely scrutinized in terms of the language they use. They say the Republican Party has been unified behind Donald Trump, and there's a feeling that the assassination attempt could lead to an uptick in support for Mr. Trump. By contrast, President Biden has been facing a lot of turmoil within his Democratic Party, with many members calling for him to stand down following his poor debate performance a few weeks ago. But that particular political crisis appears to have come to a standstill for now.
In American democracy, it's part of human nature. But politics must never be a literal battlefield, or God forbid, a killing field. I believe politics ought to be an arena for peaceful debate, to pursue justice, to make decisions guided by the Declaration of Independence and our Constitution. We stand for an America, not of extremism and fury, but of decency and grace. All of us now face a time of testing as the election approaches. And the higher the stakes, the more fervent the passions become. This places an added burden on each of us to ensure that no matter how strong our convictions, we must never descend into violence. The Republican convention will start tomorrow. I have no doubt they'll criticize my record and offer their own vision for this country. I'll be traveling this week making the case for our record and the vision, my vision of the country, our vision. I'll continue to speak out strongly for our democracy, stand up for our Constitution and the rule of law, to call for action at the ballot box, no violence on our streets. That's how democracy should work. In America, we resolve our differences at the battle box. You know, that's how we do it, at the battle box, not with bullets. The power to change America should always rest in the hands of the people, not in the hands of a would-be assassin. You know, the path forward through competing visions of the campaign should always be resolved peacefully, not through acts of violence. You know, we're blessed to live in the greatest country on earth, and I believe that with every soul, every power of my being. Here in America, everyone must be treated with dignity and respect, and hate must have no safe harbor. Here in America, we need to get out of our silos, where we only listen to those with whom we agree, where misinformation is rampant, where foreign actors fan the flames of our division to shape the outcomes consistent with their interests, not ours. Let's remember, here in America, while unity is the most elusive of all goals right now, nothing is more important for us now than standing together. We can do this. You know, from the beginning, our founders understood the power of passion. So they created a democracy that gave reason and balance a chance to prevail over brute force. That's the American we must be. An American democracy where arguments are made in good faith. An American democracy where the rule of law is respected. An American democracy where decency, dignity, fair play aren't just quaint notions, but living, breathing realities. We owe that to those who come before us, to those who gave their lives for this country. We owe that to ourselves. We owe it to our children and our grandchildren. Look, let's never lose sight of who we are. Let's remember we are the United States of America. There is nothing beyond our capacity when we do it together. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops.
Just if we could try to tone everything down, you know, even on social media, you see on social media, I try to stay off social media. Both of us try to stay off social media just because of that reason. So hopefully this sends a message. Everybody just calm it all down, man.
We know that they're trying to steal it from us, and they're going to do whatever they can to get rid of Trump. And so yesterday they tried. And so we're here to let them know that's not going to happen. We're not going to let that happen. We know we see what's happening, and it's not going to happen under our watch. Yeah, we're celebrating that he lived. Yeah, of course. Yeah, he survived. He dodged a bullet literally. Like literally, if he had not moved that one millimeter, it would have got him, because they got him right here. So tell me where they were aiming.
And that's a Trump supporter there, and before her, another supporter, and of course President Biden. Well, there have been lots of reactions from world leaders to this assassination attempt on Donald Trump. The German Chancellor Olaf Scholz described the attack as despicable. Emmanuel Macron of France said what happened was a tragedy for the world's democracies, and that France shares the shock and indignation of the American people. The British Prime Minister Keir Starmer said he was appalled by the shocking scenes. Justin Trudeau of Canada said he was sickened by the shooting of former President Trump, adding that political violence is never acceptable. That was echoed by the Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, who wrote that he prayed for Mr. Trump's speedy recovery. And the Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said that his country stood with the United States. Messages of shock and sympathy have also been sent by the Kremlin, by the Chinese president, and by the Indian Prime Minister, as well as the European Commission.
I think that the president's statement yesterday was very clear, as a full condemnation, of course, for this assassination attempt and all political violence. As he said, political violence has no place in a democracy. We are concerned, of course, by all violence, be it in the United States or elsewhere, that is of a political nature and in fact of any nature whatsoever. We believe, and this is the foundation of the European Union, that dialogue is the basis for finding agreements where there are areas of disagreement, and democracy is precisely about that. It is about exchanging ideas.
Well, for more on all those developments around Donald Trump, I'm joined now on the line from London by Arise European Affairs analyst, Dr. Marek Laskiewicz. Good to see you, Dr. Laskiewicz. First of all, I wonder what your initial reaction is to this shooting of Donald Trump. I mean, we haven't had a chance to speak since it happened on Saturday. I mean, how did you find out that the former president had been shot?
Well, it was a shock, of course. However, it must be put in context. There have been attempted assassinations and successful assassinations in America over the years, perhaps the best known being of Ronald Reagan. He survived, of course, and therefore it is by no means as surprising as might be the case if it were in another country. Please remember, America has a great many shootings, so whilst it is to be condemned, it is by no means as surprising as would meet the eye.
Nevertheless, it is still rather shocking, and it appeared from the video that he had only been grazed by the bullet, but I guess what is so frightening is if that bullet had been 1 inch further towards his head, it would have been an assassination.
Quite right. JFK, of course, was assassinated. It's the main most famous example of a successful. And in this case, Donald Trump was literally, as you rightly say, 1 inch, at most 2 inches, away from also being murdered, because that's what an assassination is, which would have been extremely bad. As it stands, the incident is shocking, but hopefully he won't suffer too much from this in the sense of physically. And as far as one can tell, he has recovered.
And as you, I mean, I know you've kind of touched on it briefly, but as you digest what has happened and the significance of it, what do you conclude?
It's very hard to work out precisely what the gunman's motives are and it maybe we'll never know. What can be analyzed rather is the effect of this shooting. On the one hand, almost everybody is stating that what will happen is that the ratings will go up probably for Donald Trump because he has survived, because he has shown that he has coped with it well, and because he has shown that he is, at that rate, a strong president. However, I would like to point out, if you're going to do a complete analysis, you have to include the effect on Biden, who has come out as a compassionate man in the sense that he did not want anything like this to happen to Trump and has condemned it utterly. But more than that, the assassination attempt has temporarily, and quite possibly, if Biden makes no further gaffes, completely buried the gaffes that Biden made. I therefore cannot state unequivocally that such an assassination attempt will help Trump in any way. I expect it to be even Stevens on this side, but let us hope there are no further attempts.
Well, I mean, I'll come back to that point you make in a moment, because that's an important one. But there was, of course, that iconic moment that we all saw on video when, after he was shot, Mr. Trump did a pump fist, which his supporters suggests that he is a fighter and he won't quit but will move on.
Precisely. This is what I meant when I said that he comes across therefore as a strong president, because it is very, very important that it is realized that this iconic moment, and it is an iconic moment, is perhaps the best moment for him, and it could generate more support for him, this very moment that you have singled out. And so in that respect, it was showed him, as I say, to be a strong man.
And just returning to that very interesting point you were making earlier, Dr. Laskiewicz, clearly a tumultuous week in America, hasn't it, with an assassination attempt against Donald Trump and the problems that President Biden has had, and it's still not clear whether Mr. Biden will be the Democratic nominee. I mean, so something of a crazy week.
It is, however, President Biden appeared very well on television just now in your program, as you showed. He showed he was compos mentis, fully in charge. And in that sense, it has also been, at the end now, a good week for him, as I said. Whether he will still be threatened by being removed, I'm not so sure. You see, I think that because of the assassination attempt, some of the heat has come out of the argument because he has done so well. It now hinges on the next few days whether President Biden makes any more gaffes or not. If he doesn't, then I expect the cause for him to resign, or that's to say no longer run, will go away. If, on the other hand, he once again starts making gaffes, then they will come back. But then comes the point I was making last week. There is no mechanism for replacing him as the Democratic nominee. There's no precedent. There's nothing to go on, in the sense that no one else has got the sort of presence that he has nationwide. So were he to be replaced, it will be tough going for a relative newcomer in this respect to have an immediate impact upon the election. And therefore, last week, it was, I think the best analysis was that Trump would win whether President Biden was replaced or not, as things stood. And this assassination attempt, I think, will simply lead to more of the same. That is to say that Trump will probably win as things stands, but it certainly has helped Biden in the sense it is hitting his gaffes for the time being.
And Mr. Biden, of course, very quickly condemned what happened to Mr. Trump, saying there's no place for violence in the democratic processes of American politics. And politicians on both sides of the divide have said similar things. I mean, how important is it for every influential voice to say things like that sort of just now?
Well, it's very important, but I've got very bad news for you. It has happened already in America over the years that there have been many, many shootings throughout the country. There have been assassination attempts already, some successful, the best known, the most notorious, of course, being J.F. Kennedy. I do not expect this outpouring of words, however noble they are, to significantly impact. The only thing they might do is reduce the temperature of this fervent debate which is happening, and as a result, there'll be no other assassination attempt for the foreseeable future. But that there'll be shootings in future in America is almost certain. Please remember, the country and many of its people are armed to the teeth.
Well, absolutely. Just returning to Mr. Trump himself, I mean, of course, it's not easy keeping him safe, is it? He loves to go out in front of huge crowds of tens of thousands of people, and it must be a difficult job keeping him protected.
Well, here I think there are questions to be asked, as already have been posed. Why somebody had a clear line of sight on him? Could the security services have done better? I imagine that there will be lessons drawn from this, but all political leaders, whenever they appear in public, do have this problem. Fortunately, in other countries, such as, for example, England, it's usually eggs or something like that, which is thrown at people, which is comparatively harmless. But it is a constant problem for a democracy that if the leaders come out, then obviously they're going to be targets. So it is a difficult job, but I think, judging from everything I've read, that they could have done somewhat better. The security services, that is.
Yes, absolutely. But that example you gave there, I think, underscores the enormous difference between sort of European democracy and America. I mean, the fact that eggs are thrown in England and in the US they use bullets to make their point. But I mean, how might this, just to summarize before we move on to sort of another question, and then we'll obviously let you go, how might this attempted assassination of Donald Trump, broadly speaking, affect the Republican convention that's getting underway now in Milwaukee, and how might all this change the election campaign?
In my opinion, it means that Donald Trump will almost certainly win the nomination, and that therefore the assassination attempt has, if you like, reinforced this image of him as the strong leader who can take down President Biden. However, I repeat that in terms of the presidential campaign, if Biden makes no more gaffes from now on, then I expect this assassination attempt to have a positive effect on him too. He came over very well on television. He spoke very cogently. And therefore, if he can keep this up, there will be no question of his being replaced. And therefore, in that sense, I think the net effect of the assassination attempt will be kind of zero, neutral. If, on the other hand, President Biden does make gaffes, then I'm afraid it will be quite clear the assassination attempt will have worked very much in Trump's favor in the long run, whereas whatever short-term benefit President Biden has from the assassination attempt will simply evaporate.
Well, thank you for that assessment of the fallout from Donald Trump, the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. Let me just ask you one further question about Europe, where you are. You are, of course, a European affairs analyst. We're hearing that Poland and the Baltic states, as well as the Nordic states, are boycotting Viktor Orban, who at the moment is the rotating president of the president of the rotating sort of European Council, because it rotates from one person to the other. What's the story there, and what do you make of it?
I'm afraid this is serious. The problem is that there are some nations, essentially the frontline states of Russia, who do not want to see any softening of the EU attitude to see the Ukraine fully supported and therefore be ever more military effort given, which is precisely what Orban does not stand for. Well, Orban becomes the president and he makes a trip to various countries, notoriously Russia and China, and so far, what is the effect of this? Well, very little, because the West Europeans, and I must draw this distinction, unfortunately, with perhaps better experience, simply stated that Orban had no mandate, and that therefore, without a mandate, his trips, however perhaps they're important for him personally, were of no importance. And had it stayed like that, then in point of fact, his trips would have been discounted, Orban would have continued his presidency and Hungary, and nothing more would have emerged, in this respect at least. Unfortunately, by stating that they will no longer work with Orban, those 6 countries have given the EU a very much weakened stance, especially of all nations in front of Russia. For Russians, any sort of disunity is weakness. They even have a word for this, Raskol, and it is one of the strongest words ever. The impression in Russian eyes is once you have disunity, then can follow anarchy, then can follow problems. And certainly there was no need for the, broadly speaking, East Europeans, of course, and Sweden, of those countries to have taken this stance, which will weaken the EU, but incidentally, it also opens the door to other such, in my opinion, non-democratic views. Because if you assume that you do not want to support Orban, because these countries, then vice versa also follows. If Poland were to be president, then why should Hungary and other nations that support Hungary also not boycott? It opens up a Pandora's box unnecessarily, but hopefully not fatally.
Well, very interesting analysis. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Laskiewicz. Dr. Marek Laskiewicz is Arise European Affairs analyst. He was talking to me on the line there from London.